Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ewen Crosby here today with a tutorial on how to work your Milky Way photos for noise reduction using Adobe Lightroom and the Sequator app if you're on Windows. If you're on Apple, I recommend that you check out the Starry Landscape Stacker, and there should be lots of tutorials out there on how to use it. That app, I will mention, is $29.99, but it's worth every penny that you pay. For those of you who are on Windows, today I'm going to show you the Sequator app. It's completely free and similar to Starry Landscape Stacker, but I will say that it's not quite as powerful, but it's really the only option that we have if you're on Windows, because the Starry Landscape Stacker does not come on Windows and it's only made for the Apple system. Alright, so without further ado, let's take a look at the files that I have for you today. Alright, so in Lightroom I have organized a couple of files, and to do this sort of stacking method you're going to need at least, I would say at least 5 shots that are sequential. Here I have 11, and let me just shrink down my thumbnails here for you. I have mine stacked in Lightroom, meaning organized in terms of stacking. I have 11 photos here, and they were all taken sequentially, one after another. And if I go into the develop mode for you here, I'll show you what that looks like. So here's shot 1, and as I move over, this is shot 2, shot 3, shot 4, and you can see the Milky Way slightly moving. The fog is coming up, and that was what we were dealing with during this shot. By the way, this was taken somewhere in the Central Valley of California. There was fog in the valley, and we went up into the mountains. This was a super bloom area as well, so we had some flowers blooming, but we really couldn't get off the road because there were fences on either side, so we decided to shoot on the road, and this is what we got. But again, these are all sequential shots, and if you're going to do this stacking method, you need to take a sequential set of shots with the same focus, same settings. For me, these were a setting of f-stop of 2.8, 15 seconds of exposure at 6400, and I was at 16 millimeters. Those settings are pretty standard for Astro shooting, but yours might be different. But you're going to need these same shots. So what I did is I took the same shot basically one after another, and what I did is I basically just locked the shutter on my remote shutter and just allowed it to take the 11 shots that you see here. And for my stacking, I like to have 11 shots. That's just kind of my magic number. As long as your exposure isn't very long, that should be great. I will mention though, as you get longer exposures, for example at a 16 millimeter, you may be able to expose for 25 seconds in reality, and that is just going to increase the time. So where I have, for example, 11 shots here at 15 seconds might equal somewhere in the range of 225 seconds or something like that, right? And in turn, if we had 25-second exposures, we're doubling that amount of time. And so the Milky Way is moving for longer. So we really want to try and get a bunch of captures in a short amount of time. And so I recommend shorter exposures if possible. And those are kind of the tips I have for you without going into too much detail on how to capture in the field. But what we're going to do is we're going to prepare these raw files that I have here, and hopefully you have a set of files similar to this. By the way, I also have some ground files here for ground shots that I took after, and you can see these are a different exposure, different ISO, same millimeter, same f-stop though. Okay, so, and I've organized these, as you can see. I've stacked the 2 grounds that I took together, and then I also organized the 11 shots for the stars, so they're easy to differentiate from each other. Okay, so to set up the raw files before we stack, it's very important that we do this correctly. And I think a lot of the videos that I see out there, and let me just go into full screen mode for you now. A lot of the videos that I see out there about stacking, they miss on some of the tips that I'm going to give you right here. So pay close attention. So first and foremost, we're going to remove chromatic aberration and enable our lens profile to correct any profile problems that we had with our lens. And because this is a wide lens, you can see that in general the corners are were a little bit warped, and also we had some vignetting. And as I click this on and off, you can see Lightroom fixing that. I may adjust it just a slight bit and maybe bring the vignetting back just a little bit, as well as maybe the distortion. Let me look at that distortion one more time. It's not too bad. I actually kind of like the correction. So I'm going to leave the distortion kind of where it is. Well, we'll just bring it back to where it was there because I like that. And I'm happy with that. Now it's important that we are going to apply all of these to these files, but we'll do that in just a moment, so don't jump ahead of me if you are. Now the only other thing that I will do to my files before I stack them is I'm also going to do something that people don't do. Most people I see leave sharpening and leave color noise reduction on. And this, for me, is very important not to do. I will turn my sharpening off. And I'm zooming in here so you can see what I'm doing, but I'm taking the sharpening off, and I'm also going to take the color noise reduction off. And now you're probably saying, wow, look at all that magenta over there in the fog and the green. There's obviously a lot of color noise in this shot, but the whole purpose of stacking is to use an algorithm to reduce this noise instead of using this color slider that we have here in Lightroom. And it does a good job, but you can see there's still a lot of pixelation here. Really what it did is it just removed the colors entirely, and there's some darkness in there and still some noise. And reality is, if we use the stacking method or Sequator to remove the noise for us, we're going to come up with a much cleaner, detailed photo, and I'll show you what it looks like before and after we're done. So again, I turn my sharpening off because I want to stack an unsharp image. I feel like if we stack a sharp image, we've already created more noise and pixelation by sharpening, albeit very small. But I'd rather stack an completely raw file basically, and then sharpen and reduce noise on the completed stacked image. So I see a lot of people in their videos do not do this, and I found this to be very helpful in getting a correct noise reduction, certainly in my sky. And what I'm really worried about here with these stars is essentially the sky, because that's what it's for. I'm not too concerned with the foreground area here, of course, because these 11 images are pretty much only going to be used for the sky portion that you see here and the stars. So really, we don't have too much noise up here, a little bit, but we will remove that very quickly. Now, I will mention that as we use this color noise slider, we are reducing the noise, but it's also removing color. So what this stacking method is going to do for us is it's going to take the noise that we see here, and it's going to compute pixel by pixel the different pixels in each one of these files. And as the noise changes, it's going to recognize that, and it's going to realize that, hey, this pixel should actually be this color. So it's going to help us to reduce that noise in that sort of method. So now that we've got the detail all at 0, no noise reduction in color or luminance and amount, and we've done our lens profile corrections, that's all I'm going to do. Some people will go in and start editing their file here, changing the white balance. I am not going to do that. However, I am going to do something else. I am going to turn my profile to Adobe Neutral, which is a much lower contrasted file, and I like this to start all of my images with when I'm editing, and you'll notice that if you watch more of my videos. Okay, so that's it. I'm not going to touch the white balance. I will do that after we stack. So those are the only two things that I'm going to touch prior to going in and basically stacking. So for Sequator, we need to first apply this this edit that we have on the first file here to the last one by selecting all of them, hitting sync. Make sure that all of your boxes are checked just to make things quick and easy. Just hit check all and synchronize. And now all of our files have the same settings from our first file, and we're ready to export them. Unfortunately, Sequator does not stack the raw files, and you must export them to a TIFF or to another type of file. I recommend a TIFF file. So what I've done is I've actually created a preset, and I'll show you that here in my exports, but I call it TIFF stack. And basically here are the settings that I have for that. I export to the same as the original folder, but I put it in a subfolder called TIFF, so it's easy to find. So I recommend that. And I also recommend putting it next to the original so that it's easy to find here from Lightroom. And then you don't have to go searching for it. File naming, I basically just name it the file name that we have here from the from Lightroom and just add TIFF to that. Video doesn't matter. File settings, so I make sure we have TIFF set, no compression. I'm exporting into RGB. If you did take your photos in, say, Pro RGB, you could continue with that if you like. I just go ahead and just crush it down to RGB at this point. However, you might keep your, if you did shoot in, say, Adobe RGB in your camera and you continue to use that in Lightroom, then you should export in that and continue the color space. Bit depth doesn't really matter. It's always going to end up at 8-bit, but I import at 16-bit, so I just keep it at that. Image size doesn't really matter at this point, although maybe we should make it 300 just for fun, but I do not resize in any manner. Output sharpening, I don't have any output sharpening on. Copyright, really we don't need any of that, so I just have that checked normally. No watermarking, and post-processing, I'm doing nothing. So I'm going to go ahead and just export all of these real fast. Let Lightroom do that. And I'm basically going to open up Sequator. Now, if you haven't downloaded Sequator, you can find a link down in my info of this video and in the description. So I recommend, if you're on Windows and you don't have it already, that you do download it. Okay, we are almost done, and let's take a look here in Sequator. So what we first want to do is, I'll kind of explain what Sequator looks like here. Up here we have where we load our images. We can load our base image, which is basically the image that we're going to align all of our other images to. We have our star images, which is the complete set of the stack. Noise images are basically what we would call like a dark image normally. It's where you put your lens cap onto your lens and then take images after your stack or your photos with the lens cap on so that the camera can capture the noise profile. And then there's also vignetting images to help correct vignetting, which in most cases, these two selections for wide field photography are something that you're probably not going to be using too much. Definitely not vignetting, I would expect, but possibly some dark images, and you can look into that and research that yourself. Now, output is what we're going to select in our output file to be named as. So let's go ahead and do that real fast. So my base image, I want to go ahead and find where we were real fast. This is my folder here, 410. So let me just locate that on my drive real fast here. Photos 2018, 410. Oh, wait, sorry about that, 2019 and 410 here. Okay, so there's my TIFF folder, and basically the first file that I'm going to do, we have one, oh, these are all my files up here. These are some old ones. Let me delete these. These are actually, I did a set from on a previous edit there. So we have these are my 11 files that are horizontal up here. I want to choose the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth file, and the reason why is because this is the middle file of the stack. I have 5 files in front and 5 files in back, and so that makes it easy for me, and it's a balanced symmetry, because basically what's going to happen when we stack, it's going to be like an accordion. All of these images that are where the Milky Way is to the left are going to be pushed towards the center, and all the images to the right, where the Milky Way is to the right of the center, are going to be pushed to the right. So it makes it easier, and there's less movement of the Milky Way in the long run. So I'm going to select my middle images and hit OK. My star images, I'm going to go back and select all of these images by holding down Shift and just clicking the first and the last file. Click Open, and now they are all loaded in there. And you can see that my base image is the middle file that you see here. Now, the output file, typically I will name as the last file in my set, which is this one here. And I'm going to also put it back into the folder, the subfolder, or the parent folder of that, rather. And I'm going to rename this with the same file number, but I'm going to name it Star Stack. And that's just easy for me to find later on when I'm going to import it back into Lightroom. Now, we have the settings of how we're going to stack these images down here below. The first setting is how it's going to basically composite the image in terms of what it's going to do. So we have the composition here, which is, are we going to align stars, or are we going to just stack these and make star trails? We are going to align the stars. Now, there's computing options. Accumulation will just basically be an accumulation of the images. So, for example, if they were already aligned, then they're going to be basically accumulating here as we stack more images. And it's basically, I take that back. Accumulation is basically going to be more of like the combining of all of the images into one. And it's not going to be selecting the best pixels for us, for example. Where this next option here, select best pixels, will help to kind of choose in terms of what pixel is noisy and which one is not noise in terms of coming out of the stack and the different pixels here. And you can choose it to be more strict or looser about selecting the best pixels. Now, the thing that I use is freeze ground, and the reason why is because I like to select the area for it to align. So for example, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go down to the sky region here, which helps us to choose what region we're going to be aligning. So for example, right now it says full area, so it's going to align the full image, including the foreground, where I really wanted to focus more on the sky. So what we can do is we can go down here and we can use this mask. When we have sky region selected, we get a little brush here that you can change sizes with your mouse wheel, or I think it's only with the mouse wheel. I don't know, I can't remember which keys you use. It's not the bracket keys like in Photoshop, so you might need a mouse wheel. If not, there's got to be some instructions in here on how to do that. But we have this brush, and what I'm going to do is just simply drag using a left click here to fill in the sky. And this brush, I will mention, is not the best brush, and I mentioned another application called Starry Landscape Stacker earlier for Mac. I feel like the brushing in that application is much easier, and also the sky selection, it really does this for you automatically. So if you're on a Mac, then wow, you should be using Starry Landscape Stacker. So anyway, I just try to brush in here fairly loosely, just generally, especially down here in the clouded area. I'm not too worried about that. But when it comes to like horizon lines, such as this mountain line, I'm trying to brush as close as possible without brushing down into the mountain area here. So we don't want it to line anything on the ground. We really want it to just focus on this sky area. And I will mention, you don't have to get too perfect. And I will also mention, if, say, for example, you brushed in like this, you can quickly erase by right-clicking and dragging over there, and you can see it erased everything for me. This can be very handy when you're getting around weird objects, such as you're shooting arches or weird things. It can be very helpful to get in some tight areas. This brush is this is the smallest that the brush will get. Unfortunately, I wish it got a little bit smaller, and maybe in the future they will make some improvements to it. Okay, so now that I have the sky region generally selected here, and if you have a solid horizon, then you need to be really solid all the way across. But for me, this is pretty good right here. I'm pretty happy with what the results are. Maybe just brush a little bit more, but I'm not going to worry too much about this area down here because my foreground will probably be brushed in, and I'm going to have to blend these in the long run. Okay, so let's go back to composition really fast. There is a line only, which will only focus on aligning things that are moving. You can try different options out here. I recommend using freeze ground. Selective will help you to remove aircrafts, meteors, and unstable objects in the sky region. So we can hit that, and that might help us remove planes if they do show up in the long run. But at first, I'm going to leave it unselected. And again, we have sky region, we have brushed in here. Now, there are some more things that you can do to process the image. In general, I will just stack and hit the start button here and stack them as is, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the settings that we have here. Auto brightness will help to correct the auto brightness if it is underexposed or overexposed. In most cases, your images are probably underexposed, so you might first stack using this way and then go back and try auto brightness. High dynamic range will help to bring out high dynamic range, of course, create more contrast in the image, and really spread the tonality. I've tried both of these on and off, and I really don't see much of a difference. But again, we can export these at different settings, so maybe I will show you how to do that. Reduce distortion effects. I really don't mess with this at all because I've already reduced distortion based upon the lens profile in Lightroom. Now, I think that this might come into effect, for example, if you were doing deep Astro and we took a large amount of frames of an image. Say we did like 45 minutes of shots of this nebula, and there could be some distortion effects because the, I don't know, there could be things in the sky, atmospheric stuff going on that got in front of the lens and looking at the nebula. So that might be where this is used. But I generally don't use this. Reduce light pollution. Reducing light pollution, I think, is more helpful in deep field photography rather than wide field. I don't use it when I say we had a little bit of light pollution on the horizon here. I'm not going to use it in that position, but you could try it out. I didn't notice any valuable effect when using it. Enhanced starlight can make the stars a little bit brighter. In general, my images, I don't use this because I've exposed my stars almost too much. I tend to overexpose my skies so that I'm getting more color out of the Milky Way. Merge pixels, actually, we should never use this, because what it'll do is, you see down here, it says merge neighbor for pixels to increase sensitivity. However, the result will be downsized to 1/4. So it's going to actually do some weird merging of pixels in here, and it ends up making your image 1/4 of its size. So we're definitely not going to use that. You can change the color space here if you choose, to linear or Adobe RGB. I would just keep it at RGB, as I stated earlier. So yeah, I mean, you can try out with some of these settings in here, to different settings. And how I do that, first I will export my star stack as is, which is pretty much none of these settings are on, and I'll just hit start, and you'll see what it's going to do here. It's going to take all of our images that we loaded, and it's going to start analyzing and composing them based upon the alignment of the stars that it's picking up. And this is a great tool if you haven't used this before, or maybe you have and you know why we're using it. But I mean, in the past, before they came out with the applications like this, I was manually aligning all of these images by hand in Photoshop, and it literally took about an hour to prepare the image. Where once you get efficient with this application, literally you can get it done within 5 minutes, and it's really not a big process. So I totally recommend doing this. If you haven't gotten into stacking your Milky Ways, then you really need to look into it and start using this application. So we're all done. I'm going to hit close, and it's going to prepare what we have, and this is our stacked Milky Way here. Now, we have saved it as star stack TIFF. What I can go in here and do is change some settings, but first I'm going to change the star stack here. So we're going to keep this, and I'm going to name it, for example, let's name it High Dynamic Range. I'm just going to name it High Dyne for short. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to turn on High Dynamic Range. So now we have an export with High Dynamic Range on and renamed as such. So we can compare in Lightroom if we want to. And then I also might try Auto Brightness as well for you guys. Okay, we're going to let this go. Got to bear with it. I'm recording, and I've got Photoshop open, Lightroom open, and I'm doing this. So the computer's doing all right. Normally, without all of this stuff going on, the processing takes, I don't know, usually under 20 seconds. So it's usually pretty quick. All right, we got 5 seconds left here, and then we're done, and we'll see what the difference is. Now, if you pay close attention, you can move this window out of the way. Kind of take a look at this. This is the original stack without High Dynamic Range that we're looking at here. When I hit close, it's going to populate our new one, and I really don't notice too much of a difference, to be honest with you. So what I am going to do is rename this one to Auto Brightness. So let's do this again, but we'll call this Star Stack Auto Brightness. And then I'm going to turn off Dynamic Range. I'm going to turn on Auto Brightness, and then I'm going to stack it one more time. All right, we'll let it do its thing. I think it was taking about 30 to 40 seconds before, so bear with me as it does it. Normally people, I'm sure, just kind of fast forward through this part and give you a little break, but I'm not going to. All right, so here we go. And as soon as we get this one done, we'll pull these 3 files into Lightroom and we'll take a look at them. Okay, so let's pull this window to the side again. Oops, there we go. And let's watch and see if this changes at all. So pay attention to what the window looks like now, and then I'm gonna go ahead and look. Oh, so that one's definitely different. Definitely brighter in the shadows. Wow. Really bright though, but I feel like the foreground looks really good. And keep in mind that this is the star images. These aren't even my cleaner foregrounds that we're going to be using, but they already look good. I mean, let's quit this. So I'm going to close it, and it's going to ask you if you want to save this project. And you can save these. I typically don't, because it's just kind of easy to get things back and going. But if you wanted to save this and come back and adjust it maybe at a later point, then you want to save the project in a location where you can find it. I don't save my projects, so I'm going to exit Sequator without saving. Yes. Okay, so let's go into Lightroom and not Photoshop there. Now what I can do is I'm going to go into the grid here, and I'm going to import the files that we just took and synchronize the folder. Let me just locate where my folder is here. 410. Okay, so I'm just going to synchronize this real fast, and it's going to ask me to import the new photos. I'm going to import them, but I'm not going to import the ones. It's going to ask me to import a lot of the TIFF files, which I don't want to do. So let me just make sure. I don't want to import. I'm going to uncheck these. I just want to import 1, 2, and 3. So let me import those real fast. Okay, so these are our 3 star stacks. And let me go in and just tag these real fast so we can get into the folder where I was at. I did a little keywording here. Oops. There we go. And so I did a little keywording so I can just find these files quickly. And let's go to this tutorial. Okay, so these are my files here. Let me minimize this stuff so we can see a little bit bigger. Let me minimize, make these a little bit smaller. And let's get rid of the 11 stack here. So those are all the things that we used. And these are the 3 files we came up with. I'm just going to drag these in between my foreground. Oh, not into the foreground. That's not what I wanted. So let's remove these from the stack. Okay, so now I have these 3 files. I really just wanted to pull these. It's not going to let me do it. Okay, well, anyway, we can compare these files in a different manner. So if we look at this file here, actually let's go to the middle file. So that would be number 6. We're going to choose this file here, and then we're going to compare it with this file here. So let's go in and take a look. So this is the original file, or the median stack that we had, and this is the median file we used for our stack. And then we have this one here. And if I zoom in here and we take a look at the difference, so this is a had noise reduction on it, a single file. This is the star stack after. So you can see that although we didn't apply any noise reduction to this area, and to this file rather, that all of that noise has been removed, and the true colors have been left behind as they should be. So this is the star stack as original star stack. Now let's compare this star stack with, and you can see this looks pretty natural to how it was, right? And you can see the difference in the foregrounds here. Look at the noise that we have down in this area of the single raw file of our stars, and then this is the foreground after. So in reality, you know, you could use this straight off as a usable file here. It's reduced the noise in not only our stars but in the foreground. All right, so let's compare this one. Let's choose this as our candidate, I guess. So there we go. And now we have the high dynamic range next to it. So this is the original star stack. This is high dynamic range. I feel like there may be a slight color correction here on this side, on the high dynamic range. Other than that, I think the tonality is pretty much the same. Pretty close. I wouldn't say there's too much of a difference between these two. Now, the next one is going to be, we can choose, this is auto brightness. Sorry, let me switch these flags here for you. So this is our high dynamic range, which is pretty much the same as the original. Let me go back to the original, I guess. Let's take that off. So the original here is on the, oops. There we go. The original is on the left, and now the auto brightness is on the right. So this is our original star stack, and this is auto brightness, and you can see that it really brought up the brightness of the image. But I think that that's really just an exposure adjustment and not much else. So reality is they're probably pretty much the same raw files. You can see there's a little bit of noise here, which is still present in this file, and of course down in this corner. But I would suggest, I don't know, it's kind of up to you. You can kind of play back and forth. I would just stick with my original star stack method that I have, and then from there, I pretty much just edit the photo and bring up the brightness if I need to. So I'm going to remove these other two and delete those from the disk. And so now I just have my 11 photos, and I have 2 foregrounds, and then my star stack. Let me remove that. So these were stacked. And if I go into the develop panel, I think I can slide this over without it getting included. I usually put my star stacks kind of in between. Yeah, it's not letting me do it. That's okay. So yeah, usually I put my star stacks in between. Oh, it's because I'm on a keyword, so I'm using keywords here in Lightroom. If you're not, then you can put it in between. And I usually put my star stack right behind my stars 11 files. Now, the next thing I would do would be to go in and do my foregrounds, and I would definitely, I'll show you kind of quickly how to do that. I'm going to use the same method here that I did before. However, I'm not going to use Sequator. So lens corrections, I actually am going to copy everything from this file, my star stack file, to my foreground here. I'm going to sync these, sync that, and then I'm also going to copy from my foreground onto the other foreground. So these are both synchronized in settings. I have the same camera profile and vignetting basically, and then no detail or sharpening. And I'm going to edit these in Photoshop, and I'll show you how to do that. So in Photoshop, we want to edit them, open them as layers. Don't open them as a smart object. You don't need to do that because we're not going to be adjusting these at all from this point forward. So we're just going to open them up in Photoshop, and here we go. So once they're open, they'll be showing as two different layers in the same file here, which we see here, top and bottom. Now what we're going to do is we're going to select these two files, we're going to right click and convert them to a smart object. If you're not familiar with what a smart object is, I suggest you go watch some tutorials on that. Unfortunately, in this tutorial, I'm not going to expand on that too much. Okay, so once it takes a moment just for it to convert it, and now what's done is you can see it's stacked the two files on top of each other in a smart object. And you can see the little icon here that has a smart object on it. And we have one layer instead of two. So what we'll do now is with this layer selected, we'll go up to Layer, Smart Objects, and we'll go to Stack Mode. So what we can do with the smart object is stack it. And traditionally I stack in a median or a mean mode. I suggest median. There are many other different algorithms to stack with, and I'm not going to go into detail on those, but you can read up on it. For this type of stacking, I definitely recommend mean or median, and median is my favorite. Okay, so now we can see that it's stacked these, and you can see the file right here showing that stack, and it's also saying that it's got a stack mode of median if we hit the down arrow. Okay, so now these files are now stacked, and what's really, you can see that the files are kind of combined in the sky, and we can almost have some star trails going on, but the foreground has not been moved. So basically, we didn't have to worry about aligning these images because the foreground shouldn't be moving in these images and only the sky. So this is why I use Photoshop, because the original stacking method was done in Photoshop, and I feel like Photoshop has a powerful tool. I think you could still do this in say Sequator, but I don't recommend it. I think Photoshop is a stronger algorithm and better at this. So now I have my two images stacked. I can rasterize this layer to remove the smart object, and we have one layer left. And I basically just save this as, and the same file name, but I'm going to name it ground stack. Okay, we'll hit OK, and it is saved. We can close this down and go back into Lightroom, and now we should have a new file. Oh, it's going to be not in here, sorry. So we'll have to go back and look at the folder. I should have just done this out of the folder, but I didn't want any other files from the night to be in our way. So now I should have a foreground here, the star stack, and then ground stack. So we have ground stack, star stack. So I have two files now, and now I'm not going to go into how to combine these files here in Photoshop. Really, this tutorial was just about stacking, and if you're interested in learning how to combine these and get so that we have our ground stack and star stack together, then you can watch some videos here in the future where I might do that, or purchase one of my tutorials on my website. And of course, I'm always available for private tutoring if you'd like. Here is an image actually that we can look at. This is an image where a finished edited image is from the same night, where I did the foreground in a long exposure, and then I had my star stack up top, and you can see I combined those two to look real nice. So I hope that you found this video informative. If you're not using Sequator, I highly recommend using it. I've been using it for all of my Astro shots as of late, and I find it to be really useful. Alright guys, that's it for now, and I hope that you found this tutorial helpful. Make sure that you follow me on some of my social media, such as Instagram at CEC Photos, on Facebook at CEC Captures, or here on YouTube at Ewen Crosby Photography. Be sure to check out my website as well, which is chrisewencrosby.com. For now, I'm signing off. Thank you for showing up and listening.